special segment here on Speak called Fair Play. This is when guests get to turn about his fair play, get to turn the tables and ask me a question about my own career in the arts. For 40 years, I have been a novelist, filmmaker, poet, core mechanic designer for games, musician, and more. I've also been the CFO of the nonprofit Blue Legacy, which includes 4 different divisions: Blue Forge Films, Blue Forge Press, Blue Forge Gaming, and Blue Forge Records. So, I have a lot to say about the creative industry, and I love talking about it. And I am here today with David Martyn, the author of the Robert Curtis Mystery Series and the Hall of Faith. Incredible Christian fiction, and also some short stories that he has had published, also Christian fiction, in 3 collections that are not Christian fiction, to kind of show the inclusiveness I think that Blue Forge Press epitomizes. But I had promised, before David asks his question, this is the fantastic little pocket-sized book. And David, you came up even with the little subtitle, A Little Good Book. Mm-hmm. And this is Huldah and the Last Righteous King. This is a blue flash edition. It's a little pocket-sized book. Read it during your coffee break, your lunch break. And I see this, and David uses this often. He'll hand this out and say, this is what I'm doing. So this is the book that we unintentionally, inadvertently did not show on Speak, and I really wanted people to get to see that. See if we'll get it to balance. It probably won't. All right, right there. Huldah? Good. David, what is your question for me today?
Well, in my career, I've interviewed a lot of people. I've sat on a lot of promotion boards. And, one of the things I always challenge people on is creativity. I'm a strong believer that if we're when the Bible says we're created in God's image, mm-hmm. that means we have many of the attributes. We're not unlimited. They're limited. They're inferior, but they're the attributes of God. And it's not mm-hmm. just our soul. It's one of the things is our creativity, because when you think of God, the first thing you think of is creator. So we are mini creators. We're and I'm not going to ask you how you're creative, because you are such a creative person. I mean, you started. You were a writer. Besides writing, you've done games, you've done films, you've directed films. You've probably cast films. You've directed. I mean, it's produced. You've done so much. You've created a publishing house, a nonprofit publishing house. You're the CEO. I'm just blown away by not only the creativity that you have, but the how much because you not only do it well, but you do it faithfully and with endurance. It's incredible. But my question is very simply this: with all these creative efforts, which one brings you the most, is the most rewarding, brings you the most satisfaction of all that you create?
So before I answer that, I want to touch on
I
something
forgot
you
to
just
add
said.
one other thing.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
You're one of the other great things that takes time and effort, of course, is also the fact that your leadership in a small group. Because beyond just the writers and the filmmakers and the producers and the musicians and the gamers, you take time for a very special group of people. So that being said, where do you find those rewards?
So I think it's so interesting when you talk about, I think you'll get the connection. I don't have to make the connection for you. I recently completed a book called Sabbath Rising. And the first half of it is something I never thought I would do. As a matter of fact, I had been asked to do, and I had adamantly denied would be that not a strong enough word. I said, there's absolutely no way I'm doing this. It's memoir. And in it, I open it, instead of like where a dedication might normally, I wanted to open it with a snippet of a real life conversation between my grandmother and I. This is my father's mother, who that side of the family is where Friday through Sunday, the weekends, my grandparents had custody, and they were the New Testament Christians. The other half of my family is actually Roman Catholic. And she said to me, writing is your gift from God. And I said, oh, Grandma, I don't know if God likes everything I write, And she's like, writing is your gift from God. And how some people would say, and I don't mean this in any kind of blasphemous way, very truly, that movement, especially among kiddos, the what would Jesus do? Mm-hmm. From the time I was very young, my question was always, what would Elsie do? Mm-hmm. That was my grandmother. Because I sometimes felt like maybe Jesus might not know what to do in a situation. I felt like modern times were so, as a teenager especially, how would he really know? But I always felt like that she would. And she was perhaps the most devout Christian I have ever met in my life. And she never said a judgmental word to anyone. I never heard her raise her voice. I have never raised my voice to my children, not once. She never raised her voice to me. She didn't spank, I don't spank. She doesn't do timeouts, I didn't do timeouts. To me, she was the example, she was the epitome to live up to. Because to me, she was the accessible symbol of a good Christian woman. By the time I was a teenager, I was on tour with a book that was not very Christian. And at the time I was angry. I was angry at the world. I was angry at, losing my dad when I was so young and being lied to for so long about, where he was and what had happened. And I was angry at the state of the world and the bigotry and the hatred. And it was almost as if, it was like Christians were being painted as the bad guys, but I often saw Christians as the good guys. So I'm like, who are these other Christians? What are these judgmental, bigoted, racist? That's not Christian. Why is this happening? It was like an internal schism. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because in another episode of Fair Play, I talked about how incredibly conflicted I was, how incredibly conflicted I remain about re-releasing that early book. And people say, well, that launched your entire career. How can you turn it? That's literally hundreds of thousands of fans. And it was a big tome, David, that the original publisher cut into 3, and the last section has never been released. So it was first released when I was a teenager, and I'm 47 now. And fans, the fans that are still on this mortal plane with me, write literally every single day. Someone writes to Brianne usually and says, when will it come out? And I haven't been, there's our friend the squirrel who lives in the walls. But, and I'm very conflicted about releasing it because it's very representative of a conflict that was going on internally in me at that time. And so I understand that's why it spoke to so many people. But it is no longer the type of work that I do. So now I get to answer your question. But I had to share that with you because I just thought she was right, of course. The moral of the story is my grandmother was right. Mm-hmm. This is a gift that I work very, very hard to keep sharp. And I write literally tens of thousands of words currently every month. It used to be every week, but at least now it's every month for work, whether it's grant proposals or project pitches or emails and correspondence. People always say, some of your emails are so brusque, and I'm like, yes, because I probably had more than 50 that day, and there is no handed off to an intern here. I receive the most joy, hands down. And you're right, I write films and direct and produce them. I write films, I write poetry, I design the core mechanics for games, I write plays, I write short stories. When I was younger, I wrote songs. I still compose music, all of those are incredible creative experiences that I certainly feel closer to divinity when I'm engaged in those activities. But the joy that I feel after writing science fiction. And for me, what I mean by science fiction is anything that explores the human condition 50 or more years from now. So I'm not particularly saying, it's got to be lousy with robots, or it's got to be on a spaceship, or, I would say my science fiction is about people like you and I, but 50 or 100 years from now.
Okay.
And how does that change our relationship with faith? How does that change our relationship with each other? How does that change our relationship with death? If we're all regularly living to be, if we just take it out, it's logical, if we're all living to be healthy, actually enjoying life until we're 100, does 40 still feel like 40 anymore? Does 80 still feel like 80 anymore? I've had authors sit in your chair that are in their 80s and 90s, and they don't seem all that different from me. And I always say, what's your secret? How do you stay so incredibly alive, crackling with energy? And they say, well, I love what I do. And that's the thing that I love that I do. I don't know why, but I just do.
Isn't creativity a gift?
Yes.
It's a gift.
Yes, and Elsie is right. It's a gift from God.
That's a gift from God. Yeah. And that's the wonderful thing about it's the truth of the lovingness of our God is that He works through His people. Yes. He could do it Himself, but we're so much better if we just get on with it and do it.
Yeah.
So no, that's wonderful.
Can you imagine, like, if you sat 100 people down by lottery, chose them randomly, and so all walks of life, right? And you said, for 1 year, I'm not telling you to live as Christians. I'm just telling you to live by the 10 Commandments. But, without exception. Just try it. Now, I know that God doesn't ask live by the 10 Commandments without exception. He says, look, you're gonna have exceptions. You're gonna mess up. You're not gonna be able to do it. Right. Period. That's why forgiveness is built into this whole system. Right. But you actually have to, it can't be serial forgiveness, right. I always say. Let's learn and move on. But let's say in this perfect world, that would be science fiction, David. We get 100 people and we just say, live by the 10 Commandments. I often think about that.
Yeah. Well, that's been the whole theme of my of the Hall of Faith, because Jesus distilled the 10 Commandments down to 2. Yeah. And that's what I keep saying over and over. That's what he asked of Adam. That's what he asked of Noah and Shem and Melchizedek. Love God, love your neighbor. And you're right.
Okay, so let's do that. Just those two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. And it, like you say, it's for a time, that's the time that I look forward to when the judgments are gone. Yeah. And reconciliation really comes to pass.
I am more interested in what someone does than who someone is.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think what someone is can be surface dressing. What someone does is who they truly are. I mean, I know that I could just say, well, actions speak louder than words, but I'm like, no, well, I think words speak very loudly, and so, I'm not going to use that one, but, yeah. All right, well, you can find my Speak interview with David on our channel, in addition to this episode of Fair Play and other episodes of Speak and Fair Play. Thank you for watching and joining us today, everyone, and thank you again, David, for coming on.